الحمد لله الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا داود إنا جعلناك خليفة في الأرض فاحكم بين الناس بالحق ولا تتبع الهوى فيضلك عن سبيل الله إن الذين يضلون عن سبيل الله لهم عذاب شديد بما نسوا يوم الحساب وما خلقنا السماء والأرض وما بينهما باطلا ذلك ظن الذين كفروا فويل للذين كفروا من النار أم نجعل الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كالمفسدين في الأرض أم نجعل المتقين كالفجار كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب صدق الله مولانا العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وأزواجه وذرياته يا داود أو داود إنا جعلناك خليفة في الأرض Indeed, we have made you a deputy on earth. فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِالْحَقِّ So judge between the people with the truth. وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَى And do not follow carnal desires. فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ Which will mislead you from Allah's path. إن الذين يضلون عن سبيل الله لهم عذاب شديد Verily there shall be a severe punishment for those who deviate from Allah's path بما نسوا يوم الحساب Because they forgot the day of reckoning. We continue with the commentary of Surah Saad. And the next verse, verse number 26, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses Sayyiduna Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam. In the previous verses, an incident was mentioned regarding Sayyiduna Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested him. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing Sayyiduna Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam, and it's clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam prophethood also, and he had also placed a government and state at his command. So he was a ruler also. And in this verse, he has been entrusted with a basic guideline for the conduct of governance and politics. And Allah Ta'ala has mentioned 3 points. The very first point which Allah Ta'ala mentions is that إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاكَ خَلِيفَةً فِي الْأَرْضِ We have made you our Khalifa. We have made you our viceroy, vicegerent, deputy. And by mentioning this point, we understand one very important lesson, which is that whenever somebody is granted leadership on this earth, no matter what that position may be, in reality, the true lawmaker is none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in reality, no one is a king, no one is a leader, nobody makes laws or rules. Whether they are the supreme judge working in the Supreme Court, whether they are the king of an entire country or an entire continent or even the entire world, no matter how high their status may be and no matter how much of a rule or leadership they have been granted, at the end of the day, they still are bound to rule by certain guidelines. And they will always be working under somebody else. And that is none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the real king, the supreme ruler, is none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every other ruler, even when he is granted this kingdom, this leadership, the status of being a ruler, then when he will make laws, when he will make rules, he will have to keep in mind the guidelines which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for him. So this is the first point which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here. And thereafter Allah ta'ala says to Dawood alayhi salam that فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِالْحَقِّ, that when you judge between people, then ensure that you do it with truth, with justice. So this is the second point, that each and every person needs to keep in mind that whenever he is in such a position where he needs to judge between individuals, or if he is made a ruler, if he is given some sort of status in society, then he must ensure that he carries out this duty with fairness, with justice, and not even for a single moment does he make a decision which will be regarded as oppressing another individual. And because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the third point, that وَلَا تَتَّبِئِ الْهَوَى, that do not follow your carnal desires. فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, because it is this following the carnal desires which will mislead you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's path. So this desires which a person has in him is unlawful desires. If he is not careful, then this is what will lead him towards making decisions which will be contrary to the will and pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights the third point also, that you will have to keep your desires intact. And when you are ruling, it's not that you just look at your own benefits, that what is going to benefit me, what is going to be beneficial for my family, what is going to be beneficial for my friend circle. You are a leader, you will have to look at the benefit of the entire community, and accordingly you will have to rule. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions these 3 points, and from amongst them the heaviest stress has been laid upon the third guideline, that do not follow your unlawful desires. And how will you be able to keep this, your unlawful desires, intact, that you do not follow your unlawful desires. Because this is something which will be very difficult. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bima nasu yawm al-hisab. That you will have to ensure that you do not forget the day of reckoning, the day of Qiyamah. If a person wants to make sure that he does not follow his unlawful desires, then whenever he comes in such a circumstance, he will have to remember that one day I will stand in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I will be questioned with regards to this particular action of mine. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions that al-kayyisu man dana nafsahu. The clever and intelligent person is he who controls his unlawful desires. وَأَمِلَ لِمَا بَعْدَ الْمَوْتِ, and he does deeds which will assist him for his life after death. وَالْعَاجِزُ, and the foolish one is he مَنْ أَتْبَعَ نَفْسَهُ هَوَاهَا, that he follows his unlawful desires. Whenever his unlawful desire craves to do something which he knows is against the will of Allah Ta'ala, then he will succumb to this, he will carry out this evil deed. وَتَمَنَّى عَلَى اللَّهِ, and in his mind he will have hope that Allah Ta'ala will forgive me. So this is a very foolish way to go about things, that a person continues to sin and he has this thought in his mind that Allah Ta'ala is very merciful, so Allah Ta'ala is going to forgive me, so let me continue to live my life in accordance to my unlawful desires. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that he will have to remind himself with regards to the day when he will have to stand in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he will be reckoned for every single decision which he made on earth. So these 3 points have been mentioned here. And after mentioning these 3 points, Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا بَاطِلًا, that we have not created the heavens and the earth and whatever is between the two in vain. Meaning there is some purpose as to why we have created the heavens, the earth and everything else which we have created. ذَلِكَ ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, this is the false belief of the kuffar, the disbelievers, that they believe that there is only this world, there is no life hereafter. فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنَ النَّارِ, may the destruction of the fire be for those who commit kufr, who commit disbelief. أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, or should those who have iman وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and do righteous deeds, كَالْمُفْسِدِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, make those who have iman and who do righteous deeds like those who spread corruption on earth? أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الْمُتَّقِينَ كَالْفُجَّارِ, or should we make the pious ones like the sinners? Now, over here, one point to keep in mind is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is mentioning with regards to a person who wants to be a leader, or a person who has been granted leadership. Leadership is something that a person should not aspire for. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has mentioned in a hadith that if a person desires to be a leader and he campaigns to be a leader, as is the norm in this day and age, that a person will campaign, he will ask for votes, and as a result he will become, be it the MP, be it the Prime Minister. And even though where there is not a voting system, a person aspires to be the king or the Prime Minister or the President or a leader in even a smaller capacity, in some smaller institute or organization. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions that if a person asks for this responsibility and thereafter he is given this responsibility, then he will not have the assistance and help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that task of his. He will be left alone. And how will a weak human being be able to accomplish this task? He will not be able to do so, so he will fail. But if a person, despite not wanting that position, due to the demand of the community or the demand of his elders, they request him and they command him that you must take this responsibility. Now he will have the assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he will have the assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will be able to fulfill that responsibility and accomplish that particular task or that mission. Now, who is worthy of being a leader? So Mufti Muhammad Shafi Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi, under the commentary of this ayah, writes that from here we can understand that a leader, no matter how much worldly knowledge he possesses, no matter what degree he possesses, no matter how much influence he has, it is imperative that he possesses the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the fear of the life after death. This is very important. He will only be able to make the correct judgment and the correct decisions and treat people fairly and carry out that task in a correct manner if he fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he fears the day when he will have to stand in the court of Allah ta'ala. Otherwise he will most definitely fall prey to the unlawful desires. And he will not rule with justice. So this is very important. And thereafter a person needs to have good character. He needs to have good character, he needs to have good traits. He needs to purify his heart. Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, during the latter portion of his life, when he was about to leave this world, somebody came to him and said that it is my opinion that so and so should be the next leader. He should be a successor. So Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said to him that, do you even know what it takes to be a leader? You have come here and you are giving me your opinion that so and so should be the next leader. Do you even know what it takes to be a leader? And thereafter he said to him that number one, to be a leader, you have to be qawiyyun min ghayri unfin. You have to be very strong, very powerful. But despite being very strong, despite being very firm, despite being very powerful, a man of authority, you can't be harsh. It's not that you're so strong that you begin to oppress people. You should be able to strike the balance. That you are very powerful, and because of your power you are able to fulfill the demands of being a ruler, of being a leader. But this power should be such that you do not cross the limits and you begin to oppress people. So you shouldn't be harsh. It's like our beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. On one side, the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, they say that Kana Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ashja'an nas. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was the most brave of all the people. So there was no individual who could compete with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in bravery. Even the most brave companions who are known for their bravery, but we see in the books of history and the books of Surah that there are occasions when the battles would become very fierce. So the Sahaba say that we would also become anxious on those occasions. But we would see Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is not holding back. He is going forward into the ranks of the enemy. This was his bravery. On one occasion in Madinatul Munawwara, a very loud sound was heard. So the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum thought that maybe someone has come to attack us. So they say that we began to prepare our armor. So it takes time for a person to wear his armor, then to mount onto his animal. So they say by the time we did all this, we saw Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is returning. And he said to the Sahaba that everybody go to sleep, there is nothing to worry about. But this was the bravery of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But it doesn't mean that because he was so brave, then he used this bravery in the wrong manner. Never did he oppress anybody. Even the wives of the Prophet ﷺ say that he never uttered anything harsh to us also. Hazrat Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, who was a young child and who served the Prophet ﷺ for 10 years. Now, if a child is serving you for a period of 10 years, each person knows how much a child, how much wrong he will do, how annoying they can be, how irritating they can be. But Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that in those 10 years, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, not once did he reprimand me. And not once did he say to me that why did you do this or why did you not do this. So this shows that despite being so brave, so powerful, a man of great authority, at the same time, he was not someone who was harsh. And Allah Ta'ala himself in the Quran says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ, that it is the rahmah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah Ta'ala had made you a soft-natured person. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا, if you were harsh, غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ, and your heart was very harsh with the people, لَنْ فَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ, then the people that sit around with you, they would have all dispersed from you. You would not have had this gathering. People would not have sat around you. So this was Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam also, who knew how to strike the balance between the two. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu said that you have to be very powerful and very strong, but at the same time, you can't be someone who is harsh and who oppresses people. And he further says that لَيِّنٌ مِنْ غَيْرِ ضُعْفٍ, that you have to be someone who is soft-natured, who is lenient, but not weak. So again, there is moderation in this. A person to strike the balance between the two is very difficult. If someone is soft-natured naturally, then majority of the time he will be weak. People will oppress him. Over here we find that on one side you can't be someone who oppresses others, and on the other side you shouldn't be so weak that people begin to oppress you also. Otherwise, how are you going to be a leader? And further on he says, جَوَّادٌ مِنْ غَيْرِ صَرْفٍ, that you should be somebody who is very generous. Somebody who is very generous. This is also qualities which parents should try to adopt. And a person who has some sort of leadership, even if it's over a few people, an employer, a boss, these are very important qualities. So, Jawadun min ghayri sarfin, that a person, he has to be very generous, but he shouldn't be extravagant. So again, look at this, that you have to be generous also, but you can't be extravagant. So you have to know how to spend upon the people. It's not that the finances are being spent in such a way that millions are being spent in celebrating your particular event, whereas at the same time the rest of the country are going through a financial crisis. This is not jawadun min ghayri sarfin. The time of the Prophet ﷺ, likewise the Khulafa Rashidin, the rightly guided Khulafa, they all ruled keeping these points in mind. And despite, they could have, if they wanted to, they could have also lived a very lavish lifestyle. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was once approached by Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, and Jibreel alayhi salam said to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam that Allah Ta'ala has sent me to you. And Allah Ta'ala is saying that if you grant us permission, we will turn this entire mountain into gold. So look, if Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wanted, he could have lived this lavish lifestyle. But what did Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam say? He said, no, I want one day Allah Ta'ala grants me food so I can be grateful to Him, and one day I want to remain hungry so that I can enjoy patience upon this. Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, once she said to her nephew Urwa bin Zubair rahimahullahu ta'ala, that we would see one crescent, thereafter we would see a second crescent, thereafter we would see a third crescent. In other words, 2 entire months will pass. And in these 2 months, there would not be a single stove which would burn in the house of any of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In other words, we would not cook for 2 entire months. So it wasn't that they wouldn't cook because there was takeaway or there was restaurants. or that people were sending food to them. What this means is that for 2 months, we had nothing to eat. So because we had nothing to eat, we couldn't cook anything. So upon this, Urwa bin Zubair rahimahullah asked Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha that if for 2 entire months you didn't eat anything, then how did you live and how did you survive? So upon this, Aisha radiallahu anha replied that aswadain, the 2 black items, at-tamaru wal ma, dates and water. In other words, for 2 months, in the house of the leader of the whole of mankind and every wife of his, the only food which was available was dates and water. And this is how they survived. And this also shows what the condition of the companions must have been. Because every companion loved the Prophet ﷺ, and they were ready to do anything and make any sacrifice for him. But even they were not in a position to assist him. So on one side we see how the Prophet ﷺ lived this very simple lifestyle. He was not extravagant, but at the same time the Sahaba also say, Kana Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajwad al-nas. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was the most generous of all the people. He was so generous that Firazdak the poet says, Ma qala la qattu illa fi tashahhudihi, walawla at-tashahhud kanat la'uhu na'am. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam never said la, he never said no. In other words, if somebody came to him and said, can I have this? You would never hear no. It will always be yes, you can have it. Somebody sees us with a nice car and they say, I like your car. What will we say? Well, that's the closest you're going to get. We won't even let him sit inside the car. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, somebody came to him and said, I like this horse. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, you like it? He said, yes. He said, if you like it, then have it. This was the generosity. So the poet says that he never said no. وَلَوْلَا التَّشَهُّدْ كَانَتْ لَاؤُهُ نَعَمْ. If there was no tashahhud, you have to say, أَشْهَدُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ, that I bear witness there is none deity of worship besides Allah. But he says, if there was no tashahhud, then you would never have heard Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say la. This shows the generosity of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And finally, mumsikun min ghayri mukhlin, that a leader is that person that he knows how to withhold the finances, but at the same time he is not a miser and he is not stingy. So he knows when to spend also, but he knows when you need to withhold also. This is what Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is teaching the likes of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma during his time. And these were the glory days of Islam, when these individuals were the leaders. We saw how amazing the leadership was. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the fear of Allah ta'ala he had during his leadership, he would say that if one animal was to be unjustly hurt in a very far distant land like Iraq, Umar radiallahu anhu is in Madinatul Munawwara, but he is saying if one animal was to be unjustly hurt in Iraq, then I, Umar, fear that on the day of Qiyamah Allah ta'ala will question me regarding that one animal also. So just imagine how careful he must have been with regards to each and every human being. And this is why on his deathbed also, he is heard giving wasiyah that whoever the next leader is, then he should ensure that the non-Muslims that live in Madinatul Munawwara, the next Muslim leader must make sure that he also treats the non-Muslims with justice. And he does not burden them with something which they are not capable of. He treats them with justice also. These were rulers and these were leaders. This is something which we learn from this verse which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning here. And after mentioning this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thereafter mentions regarding the fact that this world and whatever it contains, it has not been created in vain. There's a purpose and there's a life hereafter. Imam Razi rahmatullahi alayhi, one great commentator of the Qur'an, he mentions that here we learn another lesson, that sometimes when a person is very stubborn, whether it's a child or whether it's an adult, then you have to use wisdom when you want to explain something to them. Now, how has it deduced this from here? So, if you remember and if you recall, approximately 2 or 3 lessons ago, before the last couple of lessons, we discussed the verses regarding Dawood alayhi salam. But before Dawood alayhi salatu wasalam, in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned the verse, رَبَّنَا عَجِّلْ لَنَا قِطَّنَا قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْحِسَابِ. The disbelievers, they said that, "Oh Allah, if you are going to punish us in the hereafter, then why are you waiting till the day of Qiyamah? Grant us the punishment now." They were trying to make fun out of the day of Qiyamah. This was the verse. And after this verse, Allah Ta'ala then begins to talk about Dawood alayhi salam and brings a story from the life of Dawood alayhi salam. And now Allah Ta'ala once again is talking about Qiyamah. So you had Qiyamah, then you had the story of Dawood alayhi salam, and now you have the mention of Qiyamah again. So look at Imam Razi rahmatullahi and his insight here, that he has deduced this amazing point. He says that when someone is stubborn, then what you need to do is you need to change the topic. We do this with children also. That for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, just leave him. Don't talk about it. He doesn't want to know. He doesn't want to do something. Forget about it. Leave it. And after an hour or two, the parent will very slowly bring that in again in a different manner. If the child is not eating something and you want the child to eat it, the father will say to the mother, just leave him for now. And after 10-15 minutes, when the child has calmed down, when the tantrum has calmed down, then you try again. And you try in a different manner. So Allah Ta'ala is speaking about Qiyamah. The disbelievers are making fun out of the day of Qiyamah. Allah Ta'ala changes the entire topic and brings in the story of Dawood alayhi salam. And after bringing the story of Dawood alayhi salam, now Allah Ta'ala in a different manner again speaks about the day of Qiyamah. And how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the connection that Allah Ta'ala here speaks about Qiyamah? And he has also spoken about the fact that we have granted Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam leadership, we have made him a ruler or a king on earth. How is all this connected? So, the manner in which it's connected is that Allah Ta'ala is saying to Dawood alayhi salam that we have made you the Khalifa on earth, so rule with justice. Now, if Allah Ta'ala is telling Dawood alayhi salam to rule with justice, Allah Ta'ala is the supreme ruler. It's not that He's going to tell someone else to rule with justice, but He Himself will not rule with justice. He will also have to rule with justice. Now, if Allah Ta'ala is going to rule with justice, in this world we see someone is doing good, someone is doing evil. Someone is stealing, and after he steals, nothing happens. He isn't punished for his crime. The crime goes unpunished. There will be many crimes like this that people will carry out, they will go unpunished. Many people will oppress in this world. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And it all goes unpunished. Now, if you are saying that there is only this worldly life, then where is the justice? What about these people that have spent their entire life oppressing people and they have left this world and no one has punished them for their crimes? And on the other side, these other people who have been oppressed, the entire life they were oppressed and now they have passed away. Or someone has spent his entire life doing good deeds and he hasn't been rewarded for these good deeds. How can you say this is ruling with justice? In here there is proof that there is going to be another life. And in that second life, this is when those who did wrong, those who oppressed, those who carried out evil deeds, they will be given their results, and those who carried out good deeds, they will be given their results. So in a very indirect manner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again proves the existence of Qiyamah and the life after death. And after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally mentions regarding the glorious Qur'an that kitabun, this Qur'an, this book, anzalnahu ilayka, we have revealed it to you, O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, mubarakun, it is a very blessed book. And why have we revealed it to you? So in this verse Allah Ta'ala mentions one reason as to why the Quran has been revealed, which is liyadabbaru ayatihi, that so that the people may ponder over its verses, وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, and so that the intelligent ones may heed the advice and the warnings that it contains. The glorious Quran has been revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one right of the Quran is that we recite the Quran. And after reciting the Quran, the second right of the Quran is that a person tries to understand the Quran, which is being mentioned in this verse. Now, as far as understanding the Quran is concerned, you will have one group of individuals who are regarded as the mufassirun, the commentators of the Quran. When a person becomes a mufassir and a commentator of the Quran, he himself can understand the Quran. But to become a mufassir of the Quran, it requires a great amount of effort. This is why one wrong which we find in society today is that people try to understand the Quran themselves, despite not being well versed in the method of understanding the Quran. Just reading a translation of the Quran and thereafter trying to understand the Quran, this is not the correct method and the correct way. Rather, this is not permissible. There are Quran study circles. And in these Quran study circles, we find that 10, 15 individuals, majority of the time, those who have studied worldly knowledge, academics, university, they will sit together and they will say that, what is your opinion with regards to this particular verse of the Quran? And each member in that study circle will give their opinion, whereas they have never studied the Quran. This is not permissible. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has mentioned that person who says regarding even one verse of the Quran something through his own opinion, even if what he is saying is correct, he has erred. What he has done is wrong. And a simple example of this is that there is an individual who is prescribing medicine. Now he is prescribing medicine, but he is not a qualified doctor. He has not studied medicine. And he prescribes medicine, and each person who he prescribes medicine to, every person is being cured. Despite of this, if the authorities, if the police were to find out, this person will be arrested. And this will be regarded as a crime. Why? Because he is not qualified. He will not be able to say that I have given this medicine to 1,000 people and I have cured all 1,000. So what am I doing wrong? You can arrest me the day somebody dies. They will say, no, you are not qualified. The same goes for the Quran. If a person is not qualified, then he has no permission to speak with regards to any verse of the Quran. So in order for a person to become a mufassir of the Quran, it requires a great amount of effort, and he will have to master between 15 to 18 different sciences. 15 to 18 sciences. And even this, he will need a very close connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the more ma'rifah and the more recognition of a person you have, the more you will be able to understand what he is about to say. If there is somebody who is a stranger, and I say to him something, that today after Maghrib Salah, we are going to go there. he may understand one message. And you have another person who is very close, who spends all his time with me. And I say the same thing to him. It's very possible he will understand something else. I may be saying something indirectly. I may be hinting towards something. So a person who does not have my recognition will not be able to understand that hint. So the same goes for the Qur'an, that there are very subtle points in the Qur'an. Yes, there are certain verses which are very clear, which everybody can understand. But there are many verses in which there are gems which are hidden. So for this, a person will first of all have to become an expert. To become a mufassir of the Qur'an requires a great amount of effort. And if a person without becoming a mufassir, he tries to understand the Qur'an, then he is placing his iman at risk. Just as if there are pearls and diamonds inside an ocean, then if a person is an expert swimmer and an expert in this field, he will be able to dive into the ocean and take this pearl out. But a person doesn't know how to swim. And he goes in thinking that let me also take a pearl out. Instead of coming out with a pearl, he will go inside and he will end up dying. He will drown in the ocean. In the same way, there are many pearls in the Qur'an, but we do not know how to swim in this ocean. So what do? We simply benefit from those individuals who have already taken out these pearls and presented them before us. And this is the second stage. And the second stage is that a person can't become a mufassir, then he becomes an alim. So every alim is not a mufassir. An alim, he studies for 6 years, 7 years, and in this time he learns how to benefit from the commentaries of the Qur'an. And once he learns how to benefit from the commentaries of the Qur'an, now he can benefit from the commentaries of the Qur'an and he can understand the Qur'an. And as for those who are not able to do this also, then for them is the third manner, that they sit in such gatherings and they sit in such places where the Qur'an is being explained, and in this manner they try to understand the Qur'an. And this is the safest option. Our safest option is that we understand the Qur'an from those individuals who have dedicated their lives for this. Because they have gone to great lengths which we cannot even think of going to. Allama ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala is a great alim of the past, regarding whom Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahmatullahi alayhi, Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahmatullahi alayhi, he himself was a giant. Very great alim. A very great alim, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had also granted him a very great memory. He had a photographic memory. He himself would say that if I simply read any passage from any book, then I can remember that passage for many, many years. And if I was to read a passage with the intention of memorizing it, then I will not forget it for the rest of my life. This was the memory which Allah Ta'ala had granted Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahmatullahi alayhi. But he says regarding Allama ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, that Allama ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi was such a great scholar that if I was to try to look at his rank and his status, then my topi would fall off my head. If a person tries to look at something which is very high, then this is something which actually happens. First, when we were in Darul Ulum, this is something which we would hear a phrase, that it's so high that if you were to look at it, your topi will fall off your head. So, during my student days, in one Ramadan, I had the privilege to travel to Florida to lead the Tarawih Salah there. So, before going to America, we spent 3 days in Canada. So, our host there, they decided to take us one day to the Niagara Falls and one day to see the CN Tower. And during that time, the CN Tower was regarded as the tallest tower and building in the world. So it was on that occasion when I realized that when we stood outside the CN Tower and I looked up, my topi actually fell off my head. That's how high it was. So Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahmatullahi alayhi would say this regarding Allama Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, that this was his status. That if I was to try and see his rank and status, my topi would fall off my head. But regarding Allama Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, he himself says that رُبَّمَا طَالَعْتُ مِنْ آيَةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ, that there are certain times when I am trying to understand one verse of the Qur'an. One verse of the Qur'an. In order to understand this one verse of the Qur'an, نحو مئة tafsir, I go through 100 commentaries of the Qur'an. 100 commentaries. This happens when we are trying to also understand one verse of the Qur'an and preparing for these lessons, that you look first of all, for example, at Ma'arif al-Qur'an of Mufti Muhammad Shafi Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi. Now, the explanation is there, but due to our weakness, we do not feel that satisfaction that we have understood the verse the way it's supposed to be understood. So you open Allama Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi's tafsir, you still don't feel that satisfaction. You open Allama Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi's commentary, you still don't feel satisfaction. You go to Allama Ibn Jarir Tabari rahmatullahi alayhi's tafsir, Hakim al-Ummad Hazrat Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi rahmatullahi alayhi's Bayan al-Qur'an, Allama Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi's Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Allama Nasafi rahmatullahi alayhi's Madarij al-Tanzil, Allama Shabir Ahmad Usmani rahmatullahi alayhi's Tafsir Usmani. Now, many people will be thinking that why is all this? But this is giving you an idea as to what length you have to go through, sometimes just for one word. And after looking through all of this, you still don't feel that satisfaction, and at night also you're in bed and this thought keeps crossing the mind that where can I find this? Where can I find this? How can I understand this? Because in this part of the Quran it says this, and in this part of the Quran it says this. Regarding Imam Shafi rahmatullahi alayhi, his slave girl says that sometimes during one night, 30 times he would say to me that switch on the lantern. In those days there were not lights like today. So you would have to place the oil, it would take a good few minutes before the lantern would switch on. So she said 30 times at night. In one night, 30 times. Why? Because even in bed, those people whose passion is to understand the Quran, whose passion is to understand the Hadith, even at night, this is the thought which is crossing their mind. Whatever they've been doing during the day, even at night, it doesn't leave them. So he says that during the night, something would come into my mind. So I would think, I need to note this down. So he would say, oh, switch on the lantern so I can note this down. Thereafter he would lie down again. And after some time, again a thought would cross his mind. So he understood the value of these thoughts which were coming into his mind. That it's possible when I wake up in the morning, I will forget about it. So they would note everything down. Every time they would remember something. So once his slave girl said to him that, why don't you just leave the lantern on? So he said, no, when the light is switched off at night, there is a special mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which descends, from which we can understand the Quran in a completely different manner. This is why the way a person can ponder over the verses of the Quran at night, he cannot ponder over the verses of the Quran during the day. The night has its own speciality with the Quran. So anyway, Allama Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi would say that 100 tafsirs to understand one verse. And he says, after 100 tafsirs, after looking through 100 tafsirs, I still wouldn't feel that satisfaction that I've understood this verse the way I was supposed to. So he says, ثُمَّ أَسْأَلُ اللَّهِ الْفَهْمَ. Then I would raise my hands and I would ask Allah Ta'ala for understanding. And I would say, Allahumma ya mu'allima Adam wa Ibrahim allimni. Oh Allah, the teacher of Adam and Ibrahim, you also teach me. Wa ya mufahima Sulaiman fahimni. And oh, the one who granted Sulaiman alayhi salam understanding, you also grant me understanding. So effort was there also, and the deep connection with Allah, the du'as and the supplications. It's through this effort and through this du'as, this connection with Allah Ta'ala, this piety which they had, that they gained a very deep understanding of the Quran. So look where they were and where are we. So how can we even try to say that we are going to try and understand the Quran ourselves. It's not possible. The Jalalain is that tafsir which is taught in every seminary in the world. Anywhere you will find someone becoming an alim, if you ask him, he will say to you that yes, I have studied tafsir Jalalain. It's been so many years, approximately 800 and something after Hijrah, and we are in now 1446. So how many years has it been? But till today, look at the acceptance Allah Ta'ala has granted this work. So when is a work granted acceptance? When the person has piety, when the person makes dua to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, when he puts in the correct effort. The Jalalain, this tafsir has been authored by two individuals. First of all, Allama Jalaluddin Mahalli Rahmatullahi alayhi, he began writing the tafsir from Surah Al-Kahf. So he began from Surah Al-Kahf and he wrote the tafsir all the way to Surah Al-Nas. And thereafter he wrote the tafsir of Surah Fatiha. And after writing the tafsir of Surah Fatiha, he passed away. Now when he passed away, there was another person in Egypt by the name of Jalaluddin Suyuti. So Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti Rahmatullahi alayhi, at the time he was only 15 years old. 6 years later, when he reached the age of 21, the thought crossed his mind that Allama Jalaluddin Mahalli Rahmatullahi alayhi has authored this tafsir from Surah Al-Kahf till Surah Al-Fatiha. So it's only half the Quran. And whenever somebody will go into the bookshops and they will see that this tafsir is only half the Quran, they will not purchase it. Because you'd rather purchase a tafsir which is the whole Quran. So he thought, let me begin to write the tafsir from Surah Baqarah until the end of Surah Bani Israel and complete the 15 juz which are remaining. So he says, I began this task. And he says, I started on the 1st of Ramadan and I completed the task on the 10th of Shawwal. Meaning in 40 days, I wrote the tafsir of 15 juz of the Quran. In 40 days to write the tafsir of 15 juz of the Quran, and even that in such a way that it's so accepted that till today it is taught in every Islamic seminary. Just imagine what effort he must have put into writing that tafsir. And he himself says that I have only exerted effort in writing the academic works which I have published until the age of 40. Meaning, how much works did he publish? 500 works. And every work is a masterpiece. Jalalain Sharif and Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, these are the two works which we had the privilege to study. Until today, I can say from the bottom of my heart that it was a privilege to study these works. That's how amazing they are. So imagine he has authored 500 such works. Every work is a masterpiece. And when did he accomplish these 500 works? By the age of 40. He says, at the age of 40, this thought crossed my mind that now there is no time to carry out these sort of works. Now I need to prepare for the akhirah. This was also work of akhirah. But he wanted to completely dedicate himself to ibadah and worship. So he did all of this in the first 40 years of his life. You see what Imam Malik Rahmatullahi alayhi used to also say, that the people of Medina Munawwara, when they would reach the age of 40, then they would wrap up their bedding and put it to one side. But what this means is that when they would reach the age of 40, they would say that now there is no time for sleeping. Now we have to work for the akhirah. So what would happen when they would be tired? If they were tired, they would just lean against the wall and get some rest. And thereafter once again start ibadah and worship. So we say life begins at 40. And for them at the age of 40, it meant life has ended now. Now we have to work for the akhirah and the hereafter. So Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti Rahmatullahi alayhi and Allama Jalaluddin Mahalli Rahmatullahi alayhi, they compiled this one tafsir which is still taught in every Islamic seminary till this day. And Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti Rahmatullahi alayhi, regarding him it is mentioned that on one occasion he said to his very close companion Muhammad bin Adi that if you were to keep this a secret, then I will show you something today. But you are not allowed to tell anybody until after I pass away. So he said, fine, I will not tell anyone. I will only divulge the secret after your demise. So he said, close your eyes. So I closed my eyes. He said, do you wish to perform Asr Salah in the Haram in Makkah al-Mukarramah? So he said, that would be brilliant. They were in Egypt. So he said, close your eyes. He held my hand and he said, we walked approximately 25 to 27 steps we took. And thereafter he said, open your eyes. So Muhammad bin Adi says, when I opened my eyes, I saw I was standing right in front of the Haram in Makkah al-Mukarramah. He says, we performed the Asr Salah, we did Tawaf, we drank some Zamzam. And after drinking Zamzam, Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti rahmatullahi alayhi saw that I was very astonished, very amazed. So he said, do you find this amazing? Let me tell you something which is even more amazing. He says, when I do this many a times, and he says, whenever I come to the Haram in this manner, there are many people here who used to live in Egypt, and they all know me. When I come in this manner, even though I am in the same form, they are not able to recognize me. Thereafter he says that I said to Muhammad bin Adi that, do you now want to remain here because in a few days it's going to be Hajj? Or do you wish to return because I am going back to Egypt? And Muhammad bin Adi said, I will come back with you. He said, close your eyes. We took a few steps. He said, open your eyes. When I opened my eyes, you were in Egypt again. This was the caliber of Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti rahmatullahi alayhi. When he went for Hajj, he performed Hajj many a times. But on one occasion when he went for Hajj, he made this dua and he said that, oh Allah, grant me the fiqh of Allama Bulquni rahmatullahi alayhi and grant me the memory of Allama Hafidh ibn Hajar Asqalani rahmatullahi alayhi. They were both great individuals. So look, when they would drink Zamzam, they were not making dua for worldly things. They were making dua for ilm, for knowledge. And when they made dua for these things, Allah Ta'ala granted them these things also. These individuals went to these lengths, and after going through these great efforts, great sacrifices, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them a deep understanding of the Qur'an. Then it's very easy for us that we should rely on their works and understand what they have presented before us. And if that is something we cannot do also, then the ulama in our times, they try to simplify that also. Because what they have simplified now, that's also difficult for us. So in this day and age, the ulama simplify that also and place that before us also, so that we can also understand the Qur'an. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse also is mentioning this point, that one reason why the Qur'an has been revealed is so that we may ponder over its verses. And when we will ponder over the verses, then we can take heed from the advice and the warnings that it contains. So finally, ending the lesson today, Allama Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi mentions that in this verse, dalilun ala wujubi ma'rifati ma'ani al-Qur'an. That Allah Ta'ala says, liyadabbaru, the reason why we have revealed the Qur'an is so that people may ponder over its verses. There is proof in here that it is necessary for a person to understand the meanings of the Qur'an. And number two, dalilun ala anna ad-tartil afdal min al-hadh. There is also proof in here that when a person recites the Qur'an, it is more virtuous to recite the Qur'an slowly in comparison to reciting it fast. Because if a person will recite it slowly, he will be able to ponder over the meaning of the Qur'an in a more better manner compared to if he will recite it fast. And finally, Hazrat Hasan Basri rahmatullahi alayhi writes that tadabbur ayatullah, tadabburu ayatillahi ittiba'uha, that Allah Ta'ala here is saying ponder over the verses of the Qur'an. The pondering over the verses of the Qur'an means to follow the commandments of the Qur'an. So first a person will have to understand the Qur'an, and once he understands whatever lessons he can derive from there, he will have to then bring into his life. When he will do this, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant him the success of this world also and the success of the hereafter also. We make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us the ability to understand the glorious Qur'an in the manner that it is supposed to be understood. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this easy for us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also grant us the ability to practice upon every verse of the Qur'an and make our lives in accordance with the teaching of the Qur'an. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.